are back on the 0 hour. And to help us parse the events of the last week, and again, I will say the event of the last week, the election of Donald J. Trump as your president of the United States, here to help us parse this in a broader context, a historical context, is our good friend Kathleen Frydl. Kathleen is a historian. She's the author of several books, including, I'm going to get the title right, The Drug Wars in America, 1940 to 1973, and her first book, The GI Bill, won the Louis Brownlow Award, which is, I guess, a big deal among historians. And she joins us now once again to help us with this extraordinary historical event. Kathleen, thanks for coming on the program.
You're welcome. What if I can't help at all?
Well, then we'll just scrub the segment. But by help, I don't mean necessarily make it better.
Right.
By help, I mean just help us understand. You know, I think by understanding, that gets us closer to making it better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And actually, we've seen a horrendous number of bad takes, in my opinion, since Tuesday night. And so if we can get the ball rolling in favor of good takes, maybe that's a service in and of itself.
Yeah, you know, I was telling you before we began recording this segment that one of my problems was I had tweeted out a few things on Tuesday night, and one of the things I said was, we need to look at what went wrong with the media and the whole pundit class and the pollster class. And somebody tweeted out in response, woulda, shoulda, coulda, let's just change things. And my attitude is, you can't change things you don't understand. So first of all, you have to understand what went wrong.
Right. And I think the quick answer to what went wrong, in my eyes, is the Democratic Party establishment. This is a party, for me, the story of this election is turnout, and our turnout took a huge nosedive. We have right now a group of people trying to characterize Trump voters as kind of economic populists and warriors against globalization. I think that take is horrendous, and maybe we can talk about that. But equally bad and more important are the takes that ignore turnout. Turnout is the story of this election. We did not have white, working class, low-income voters turn into Trump voters this election. So far, the estimates I saw were only about 300,000 voters who voted Democrat, who fit that profile in 2012, voted for Trump this time around. 800,000 of those same voters voted for third-party candidates, so Jill Stein or Gary Johnson. And to them I say thank you, because they did not choose a message of hate, right? I mean, however much people want to recriminate them, I think that's useless. You know, they had a Democratic Party that failed them, not for 4 years, but for 8 years. And still, they did not choose a message of hate in Donald Trump. Those 800,000 voters are Democrats, and we need to get them back. More important in my eyes, or just as important, I should say, are the 4 million white working class, low-income voters who stayed home from the polls this time around, who showed up to vote Democrat even in 2012. Just in 2012, which itself was not the world's greatest turnout, especially when compared to 2008, which was a stellar turnout for Democrats, right? We had 4 million voters stay home. And for me, I don't know how you feel about it, but the story of those 4 million voters, in my eyes, can kind of be told through the metaphor or the synecdoche of the Department of Justice. So on the one hand, you have the Office of Civil Rights that's busy with voter suppression. And voter suppression is, in fact, part of the reason why those 4 million voters stayed home. But another part of the story are the other parts of the Department of Justice. Let's say the Antitrust Division. Let's say the Criminal Division, which have not been working hard. And in order for the Democratic Party to bring those 4 million voters to the polls, we need the whole damn building of the Department of Justice to work.
And that's just one branch of government. There's also the Department of Treasury. There are also, there's a Department of Education. There are multiple departments. But you brought up a number of important points there, Kathleen, and I want to remember and respond to all of them. But I think one of them that I think is very important is the notion that turnout was down. And I think the notion that the Justice Department wasn't out there fighting for the American people, I think that's reflective of a deeper problem, which is I think it's reflective of a Democratic Party mindset
Yes.
that says we can have it all. And by we can have it all, I mean the notion that we as professional Democrats, I'm not a professional Democrat,
Right.
but
You only play one.
I'm not I'm an independent actually,
Right.
but and I did work for a Democratic candidate, but the notion that's not my thing. That's not what I do. I was asked to do it by Bernie Sanders. I did it, but for the people who do that for a living, I think the notion, and including the politicians themselves, too many of them have the attitude that I can present myself as a liberal hero of the people and then retire to a great corporate job and raise great corporate money to do it. I can have it both ways, and therefore I can fuzz the message a little bit, and I can fuzz the policy a little bit, I can fuzz my deeds a little bit, and that nobody will notice,
Right.
and
Right.
I can win, or the candidate I work for can win, but that at the end of the day, what happened finally is that chain ran out. That thread ran out, and all of a sudden people were saying, wait a minute, my life is crappy. Why should I go out and vote for this person?
Right, but that's like an algorithm of diminishing returns, right?
Yeah.
And that space just got really contracted. What you're saying really reminds me of my frustration. Those of you who have watched me on this, show before know that I'm not Hillary Clinton's biggest fan. But what you just said reminds me so much of my frustration with the arrogance of the Clinton campaign in thinking that they only needed to show negative ads.
Right. Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
That they needed no aspirational, affirmative message and commitments to make, right? Because affirmative messages entail, I'm for this and I'm against this. But instead what we got was, Donald Trump's an awful human being, Donald Trump's an awful human being. No commitments to what they're aspirationally, affirmatively about. No choices made. Well, how did that work out for you?
Well, exactly. And I will say parenthetically, as long as we're talking about the Clinton campaign, that, when she began the campaign by saying, I want to be your champion, to me, if you have to say I want to be your champion, instead of just being my champion, if you say it, it's like saying, may I speak frankly? You've just told me you're not speaking frankly.
Right.
If you say, I want to be your champion, no, just go be my champion. I'm not stupid. I'll pick up that you're being my champion.
Right.
Do you get what I'm saying?
I do. I don't think Bernie Sanders had to run around telling people that he's for them. I think they understood that he was for them. But I have a lot of unkind words and critiques for the Hillary Clinton campaign, but I don't want to leave out the Democratic Party establishment. Now, I understand that they're very closely tied.
Right.
But at the beginning of this election cycle, when it was clear to me that we as Democrats would not have a competitive Democratic primary, that instead we would have a coronation based upon the campaign war chest that Hillary Clinton was able to amass. And we actually, by the way, happened by accident to get a competitive, or at least a somewhat competitive primary, because we found a candidate who wasn't intimidated by that war chest.
Right.
But many others were. Now just think of it. Here we have a candidate who is historically unpopular with Americans, and you don't even want to test her with a competitive primary. And again, I'm saying these things to these people who I happen to know who are involved in the Democratic Party establishment. What we find, I think, Richard, I think you probably found this as well, is when we talk to those people who have running the algorithm of diminishing returns, they're always smarter than us until Donald Trump is our president.
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. The phrase, if I had to pick one cliched phrase to describe the Democratic Party establishment, it's too clever by half. Talk about algorithms and diminishing returns, right? It fits right in there.
Exactly.
And the fact is, look, I hope, and I've said this a couple times, but I hope that to the extent that if there's a silver lining in this, it will be that there'll be an absolute house cleaning within the Democratic Party.
And here we are Thursday afternoon, and we have not heard anything. I don't understand why Donna Brazil's resignation is not front and center in front of me right now. This is a failure. What happened Tuesday night is a failure, not just of the Clinton campaign. It is a failure of the Democratic Party. We did not get our voters to the polls. That's a critique of the Obama presidency. That is a critique of the Democratic Party establishment. And it is a critique of the Hillary Clinton campaign altogether. And all three of those things should be seriously analyzed if we're going to move forward in a positive direction.
There are ancient cultures on this earth where people would have committed ritual suicide by this point. And to speak to that point, this gets to something I've been saying. It's kind of provocative, but I'm going to say it anyway, which is that I think for all their lecturing, this centrist establishment of the Democratic Party, they lack exactly the things they preach in other people, starting with an ethic of personal responsibility. The fact is, whenever they fail, and they fail spectacularly, time and time again, whenever they fail, it's somebody else's fault.
You know,
let me just finish my rant, okay?
It is a rant.
It's the voters' fault.
Right.
It's millennials' fault.
Yep.
It's Latinos' fault.
Putin.
It's Putin's fault. It's never, you know what? My message was crap. My candidate was crap.
Right.
I didn't have my act together. I miscalculated what was going to happen. As you say, here's my resignation.
You know, what you're saying reminds me of something I was reading recently in Ken Galbraith's book. I think it's called Money. You know, from where it came and where it went. And Ken Galbraith was kind of musing about how mistakes from powerful economic actors are merely interesting, whereas, you know, economic mistakes from, you know, people like you or me and ordinary people can be life-ending and very serious in nature. And this is the same sort of thing, like, oh, we just didn't we underestimated turnout in our, you know, models. So that's interesting. And it's like, no, it's not interesting. We have a fascist as president. It's more than interesting. It's damning, and you should regard it as such.
It's like, oh, I overestimated the length of runway. You know,
exactly.
That's not interesting.
Exactly. Right.
That's a catastrophe.
Yes, and I think that repudiation of the Democratic Party establishment is one of the few things that is a strong and solid takeaway from this. I want to caution the left, and especially the labor left, from not overreading into these results, because one of the things I found interesting about Tuesday night's results, this is not our electorate. Progressive candidates lost. Zephyr Teachout lost. She lost convincingly, right? What was interesting about Tuesday night's vote was that many of our ballot initiatives actually won.
No, absolutely.
Right, so not just minimum wage, which kind of always wins when it gets on the ballot, but gun control, education measures that were very important to us, including No on 2 in Massachusetts. Right. We had, and of course, legalizing weed.
Well, legalizing weed and electing Donald Trump, to me, is allowing supply and creating demand. But, okay, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So we have issues that can win if we have the candidates, right, who can give voice to those issues, and if we can get to our electorate to the polls. So for me, I mean, I think the left feels vindicated by this election. I would caution not to overread the results. I think the one strong read is whoever's in the Democratic Party establishment now, and the DNC is only one part of that. I mean, there are a lot of private actors who are involved in what we call the Democratic Party. Whoever's there now needs to go. I mean, they are completely, I think, discredited. In my eyes, they're completely discredited. This is a total party failure from the top of the ticket all the way down. It's a disgrace. And I just, again, here we are Thursday afternoon. I am amazed that we are not seeing on our Twitter timeline and places like that news of resignations and new appointments and so on and so forth. I saw a little bit today that Bernie Sanders is supporting Keith Ellison for the new chair of the DNC. That's very hopeful. We need a whole string. We need not just a new figurehead. We need a whole string of down-the-line new appointments committed not just to a fairer process from within our party, but a more vigorous process. One of the things that annoys me about the Democratic Party, if I could also rant,
be my guest, which you are, actually. So, okay.
I am a guest, is that not every state is required to write their own party platform. I just think that's a huge missed opportunity for Democrats. It's always extremely interesting to me, as somebody who researches what Democrats are thinking about, for instance, on drug policy, to read state party platforms. That's their voice to the National Democratic Party. We have so many states, large states, Ohio, which, by the way, the Ohio Democratic Party,
right,
you know, this election, they just mimic the National Party platform. No, get together. Tell us what you think. For instance, blue Democrats in red states throughout, not just the Rust Belt, but throughout the entire Midwest have told us monopoly power is a problem. And they're in states that we don't normally win, but they've been carrying a very important message to the National Party. We need that. We need that grassroots mobilization, recruiting every possible voter we can.
Well, and I think it's a great idea, and I think it also reflects a deeper sense of a vision of change for the party, which is to make it more ground up rather than top down.
Absolutely.
But money is driving it top down
Absolutely.
right now. And until it becomes less a party of money and liberal privilege and more a party of transformative change, it's going to remain in the hole. And the fact is, if Democrats can't see that they're in a hole now, with Republicans holding all three branches of government, despite having run the most unpopular presidential candidate in recorded history, in modern history, then they're never going to get the message. So it's time to get the message. And unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, speaking of getting the message. But Kathleen, yes.
Right, one more word.
Make it fast.
The other ballot initiatives that really won were voting ballot initiatives. So ranked choice voting in Maine won. Publicly financed campaigns won in South Dakota. The Democratic Party should come out as a party in favor of publicly financed campaigns.
If its donors will let it. So, no, I agree with both those things. Number one, publicly financed. Number two, rank file voting. So, all right, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. But Kathleen Frydl, historian, as always, a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Richard.
And we will be right back after this. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.